The darkness between stars was Kelthok's only companion now. His ship moved quietly through space, hidden among the rocks and ice of the dead asteroid field. Once, his people ruled the galaxy, called themselves the Apex, because they were perfect, strong, smart, and impossible to defeat in battle. Now he was the only one left. Kelthox pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of his ship. The silence around him felt heavy, like a weight on his chest. 30 years ago, there had been billions of his kind spread across hundreds of worlds. They had cities that touched the clouds and armies that made enemies surrender before the fighting even began. The apex were everything other species wanted to be, but never could. Then the coalition came together, not to trade or make peace, but to destroy them all. He walked to the front of his ship and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, coalition fleets were moving through space, carrying supplies and weapons to their bases. They were safe now. He thought the apex were just stories that parents told their children to scare them. They were wrong. The computer on his ship made a soft sound. New information was coming in. Kelthok sat down and read the data on his screen. 3 coalition cargo ships were moving through the Helix Nebula, protected by only 2 small warships. They were carrying medical supplies to the outer worlds, probably to help soldiers who had been hurt fighting against other enemies. Kelthox smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had found his prey. He remembered. When battles were different, when armies met in open space and fought with honor, the strongest one and the defeated accepted their loss with dignity. Those days died with his people. The coalition learned that fighting the apex with honor meant losing every time, so they chose a different way. They called it a war of defense, but it was really murder planned out over many years. His fingers moved across the controls of his ship. Engines came to life, pushing him forward through the asteroid field. He had done this hundreds of times before. Attack quickly, take what he needed, leave no one alive to tell others what happened. It was not the way his ancestors had fought, but his ancestors were all dead. The coalition had been smart about killing the apex. They did not try to fight them in big battles, where apex strength and skill would win. Instead, they poisoned their water, bombed their cities when most people were sleeping, and spread diseases that only hurt the apex. They told the galaxy that the apex were monsters who wanted to enslave everyone. Most species believed them because they were afraid of what the apex could do. Kelthox had been off-world when his home planet died. He was a soldier then, young and full of pride. He came back to find nothing but ash and bones. His family, his friends, his teachers, his lovers, all gone. The cities were empty ruins. The great libraries where his people kept their knowledge were burned. Even the children had not been spared. That was when he learned to hate. The cargo ships appeared. On his screen now, moving slowly through space like fat animals who did not know a predator was watching them. The 2 escort ships were old models, not very fast or well-armed. This would be easy, but easy did not mean it mattered. Kelthox could raid 1,000 ships and it would not bring back even one of his people. Could kill 1,000,000 coalition. Soldiers and his homeworld would still be a dead rock floating in space. Sometimes he wondered why he kept fighting. The answer always came back to him the same way. He fought because he was apex. Because his people deserved to be remembered as more than the lies the coalition told about them. Because someone had to. Make the galaxy pay for what it had done. His weapons powered up with a low hum. The targeting system locked onto the escort ships. In a few minutes, they would be dead, and he would take whatever supplies he needed from the cargo vessels. Then he would disappear back into the darkness between stars, and the coalition would lose a few more ships to the ghost. They thought they had already killed. Kelthox was the last of the apex, but he was still apex. That had to mean something. That had to be enough. He pressed the button to fire his weapons, and 3 bright beams of energy shot out toward the coalition ships. The lonely war continued, one small battle at a time. In the cold silence of space, the last hunter stalked. His prey, keeping alive the memory of a people who had once been perfect. The galaxy had tried to forget the apex. But Kelthox would not let them. Not while he still breathed. Not while he could still fight. The coalition had won their war of extermination, but they would never have peace. He would make sure of that. The attack started like all the others. Kelthox came out of the asteroid. Field fast and quiet, his weapons already charged and ready. The 2 Coalition escort ships were exactly where his computers said they would be. Old ships with weak shields and slow engines. This should have been over in minutes, but when his first shots hit the lead escort ship, something strange happened. New ships appeared from behind the cargo vessels, ships he had never seen before. They were smaller than Coalition fighters but moved in ways that made no sense. One of them flew straight at his ship like the pilot wanted to die. Kelthox pulled his ship to the side just as the enemy fighter crashed into the space where he had been. The explosion was so close it shook his whole ship. What kind of pilot would do that? What kind of species fought by trying to kill themselves? More of the strange fighters came at him. Their weapons were not very powerful, but they fired them. Without stopping, they did not try to protect themselves. They did not run when his bigger guns hit them. They just kept coming, even when their ships were breaking apart around them. One fighter got hit so badly that its cockpit broke open. Kelthox could see the pilot inside, a small figure in a spacesuit. The pilot should have been trying to escape, but instead, they kept firing their weapons with their hands until the cold of space took them. By the time the battle was over, Kelthox's ship was badly damaged. Most of the escort ships were destroyed, but so were all the strange fighters except one. A single escape pod floated near the wreckage, signal showing someone was still alive inside. Kelthox brought the pod into his ship. Inside was a female. From a species he did not know. She was smaller than him, with dark hair and brown skin. Her uniform had symbols he had never seen before. When she woke up in his holding cell, her eyes looked at everything around her like a soldier studying a battlefield. "You are supposed to be extinct," she said. Her voice was calm, like she was talking about the weather. Kelthox was surprised. Most prisoners begged for their lives or tried to make deals. This one just looked at him and spoke the truth. "So I am often told," he said. "What are you, human?" "My name is Lee Hanna. I am a commander in the Human Defense Force, and you just killed my squadron while we were protecting people who told us you were all dead monsters from the old wars." The words hit Kelthox like a physical blow. This human had been protecting the Coalition. The same Coalition that had murdered his entire species. How was that possible? "Tell me about these old wars," he said. Lee Hanna studied him for a long moment. "The Coalition says your people tried to enslave the galaxy. You killed billions of innocent beings because you thought you were better than everyone else. They say the war against the Apex was fought to save civilization itself." Kelthox felt anger rising in his chest, but also something else. Confusion. This human believed what she was saying. She was not lying to trick him. She really thought his people had been monsters. "My people never enslaved anyone," he said. "We were strong, yes. We were better fighters than most species. But we did not attack others without reason. We protected trade routes. We stopped pirates. We kept peace in parts of the galaxy where no one else could." "Then why did everyone turn against you?" The question hung in the air between them. Kelthox had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times over the past 30 years. "Because they were afraid," he said finally. "Afraid that we were too strong. Afraid that we would take what they thought was theirs. So they decided to kill us all before we could become a real threat." Lee Hanna was quiet for a while. Then she asked, "How many of you are left?" "I am the last." Something changed in her expression then. Not pity, but something like understanding. "That must be very lonely." "Loneliness is better than lies," Kelthox said. "Your Coalition friends told you we were monsters, so you would help them finish what they started. They used your people as weapons against an enemy that was already defeated." "If that is true," Lee Hanna said slowly, "then we need to talk more." Over the next few days, Kelthox found himself doing something he had not done in 30 years. He was having conversations with someone who listened. Lee Hanna asked questions about his people, about their culture, about what had really happened during the war. In return, she told him about humanity. Her people were new to the galaxy. They had only joined the Coalition 5 years ago after their planet was found by Coalition scouts. The Coalition had offered them technology, trade, and protection in exchange for military service. Humanity had agreed because they thought they were joining something good. We were told we were bringing peace to dangerous parts of the galaxy, Lihana said. Fighting against criminals and terrorists who threatened innocent people, and now? She looked at him with eyes that seemed older than they had been a few days before. Now, I am starting to wonder who the real criminals are. When Lihana's escape pod left his ship 3 days later, Kelthox watched it go with mixed feelings. For the first time in decades, he had talked to someone who might understand, someone who might be willing to learn the truth. The war was about to change in ways the galaxy had never seen before. Lihana's escape from Kelthox had been too easy. She realized this as her pod drifted toward the human patrol ships that had been searching for her, could have stopped her from leaving. His ship was faster and stronger than anything humanity had, but he had let her go, and she knew why. He wanted her to find the truth. When she returned to the human fleet, her commanding officers were happy to see her alive. Captain Park Soo-jin listened to her report about the Apex survivor, but his face showed doubt when she mentioned Kelthox's claims about the war. The Coalition has been our ally for 5 years, Park said. They saved us from isolation when we first reached the stars. Why would they lie to us? Because they needed us to help them finish a job, Lihana replied, and we were stupid enough to believe them. She spent the next 2 weeks digging through human military records. What she found made her stomach turn. Every mission they had been sent on, every battle they had fought, every enemy they had destroyed, it all pointed to the same thing. Humanity was being used as a weapon against the Coalition's enemies. The evidence was hidden in classified files, buried under layers of security codes. But Lihana was good at finding things that people wanted to keep secret. She found records of Coalition meetings where human commanders were not invited. She found supply lists that showed humans getting older weapons while Coalition forces got the newest technology. She found communication logs that talked about humanity like they were tools to be used and thrown away. The worst discovery came when she broke into the deepest Coalition archives. There were videos from the Apex worlds during the final days of the war. She watched Coalition ships bombing hospitals and schools. She saw them releasing poison gas into city centers where families were trying to hide. She watched them kill Apex children who had never hurt anyone. And she saw the reports these same Coalition leaders wrote afterward, describing the Apex as monsters who had to be stopped at any cost. Lihana brought her findings to Captain Park and Colonel Kim Min-ho, 2 officers she trusted completely. They looked at the evidence in silence, their faces growing darker with each new piece of proof. They played us, Colonel Kim said finally. Made us into their attack dogs while telling us we were heroes. What do we do about it? Captain Park asked. Lihana looked at both men. We go back to the Apex. We tell him what we found. We figure out how to make this right. 3 days later, Lihana returned to the asteroid field where Kelthox was hiding. This time she was not alone. Captain Park, Colonel Kim, and 12 other human officers came with her. All volunteers who had seen the evidence and decided they could not serve the Coalition anymore. Kelthox met them in the docking bay of his hidden base. The facility was larger than Lihana had expected, carved out of a dead asteroid and filled with equipment he had stolen from Coalition forces. Over the years it was impressive, but also sad. One person living alone in a place built for many. You came back, he said to Lihana. You brought friends. We brought allies, she corrected. People who are as angry as you are about what the Coalition did. Captain Park stepped forward. Commander Lee showed us the evidence. The Coalition used us to help them commit genocide. Our people were told we were bringing peace, but we were really finishing a war of extermination. Kelthox studied the humans gathered around him. They were so different from his people, smaller, weaker, with short lives and fragile bodies. But something in their eyes reminded him of the Apex warriors he had once fought beside. Determination, anger, the will to fight for what was right. What do you want from me? He asked. Colonel Kim smiled, and it was not a nice smile. We want to teach the Coalition what happens when they manipulate humanity. We want to show them that humans do not like being lied to. Your people are new to galactic warfare, Kelthok said. The Coalition has been fighting for centuries. They have more ships, more weapons, more experience, but they do not know how humans fight, Lihana said. They think we will play by their rules, fight their kind of war. They are wrong. Over the next few hours, the humans shared their ideas with Kelthox. They talked about tactics he had. Never heard of strategies that would have horrified his honorable ancestors. They spoke of turning the Coalition's own systems against them, of making their allies distrust each other, of fighting a war where victory mattered more than honor. Kelthox listened and felt something he had not felt in 30 years. Hope. Not just for revenge, but for actual victory. These humans fought in ways that the Coalition would never expect. They were willing to do things that other species would call dishonorable or wrong. The Coalition destroyed my people because we were too proud to fight dirty, Kelthok said. We followed rules of war that our enemies ignored. We died with honor, but we still died. Then let us teach you how to win without honor, Captain Park said. Let us show the galaxy what happens when humans go to war. As the planning began, Kelthox realized that his lonely fight was over. He was no longer the last warrior of a dead species. He was now part of something new and dangerous. The Coalition had created their own worst enemy by lying to humanity. They were about to learn what a terrible mistake that had been. 6 months after the Alliance began, the galaxy learned what humanity meant by war. It was nothing like the battles other species remembered from their history books. There were no grand fleets meeting in open space, no honorable duels between warriors, no codes of conduct that kept civilians safe. Humans fought like a disease spreading through the Coalition's body, attacking everything at once. Colonel Kim Minho sat in a dark room filled with computer screens, his fingers dancing across keyboards as he rewrote the Coalition's reality. His cyber warfare division had turned the enemy's own communication networks into weapons of confusion. False orders sent Coalition fleets to empty sectors while real threats went undefended. Supply ships received wrong coordinates and delivered food to military bases that did not exist. Admirals found themselves commanding fleets that had been secretly reassigned to other sectors. The Vorthok Third Fleet just fired on the Zalarian convoy they were supposed to protect, reported Lieutenant Choi Minsu, one of Kim's best hackers. They thought the Zalarians were human infiltrators. Kim smiled as he watched the chaos unfold on his screens. Good fear makes people stupid. Stupid people make mistakes. In another part of human space, Captain Park Soo-jin was teaching Coalition. Force is a different lesson about human warfare. His commando teams did not wear uniforms or announce themselves before attacking. They disguised themselves as refugees, as merchants, as anyone the Coalition would not suspect. They planted bombs in supply depots, poisoned water systems at military bases, and assassinated political leaders who supported the war effort. The Coalition had never faced enemies who attacked soft targets. Their military tradition focused on protecting soldiers and fleets, not politicians and supply lines. They were not prepared for humans who treated everything as a legitimate target. The governor of Kepler Station is dead, Park reported to Lee. Hannah, during their weekly planning meeting, made it look like food poisoning. His replacement is already talking about pulling Kepler out of the Coalition. How many more systems are wavering? Lee Hannah asked. 17 at last count? Turns out most Coalition members joined for protection and trade benefits. When those benefits start costing more than they provide, loyalty becomes expensive. But it was Lieutenant Commander Choi Gi-won who truly terrified the galactic community. Her psychological operations division had turned Coalition prisoners into willing traitors without using torture or threats. Instead, she studied each prisoner's fears, desires, and weaknesses, then carefully manipulated them until betrayal seemed like the logical choice. Captain Vexstar has agreed to provide us with the defense codes for the Rigel sector, she reported to Kelthox during one of their strategy sessions. He thinks he is secretly working to end the war and save lives. Kelthox watched the human woman's calm expression with growing unease. You made an enemy commander. believe that betraying his own people was the right thing to do? I helped him realize that his leaders were sending good soldiers to die for bad reasons, Choi Ji-won corrected. He came to the conclusion himself. I just provided the right information at the right time. This was not how the Apex had fought their wars. Kelthok's people had been warriors who met their enemies face to face, who won through superior skill and strength. They had codes of honor that protected the innocent and respected the defeated. What the humans were doing would have been considered shameful by Apex standards, but it was working. The coalition was falling apart from the inside. Member species that had stood together for centuries now viewed each other with suspicion. Supply lines collapsed as human saboteurs struck at weak points the coalition had never thought to protect. Political alliances crumbled as human agents spread carefully crafted lies about secret treaties and hidden agendas. The hegemony of worlds is demanding an explanation about the Terran trade agreements, Lee Hanna reported during their monthly alliance meeting. They think the coalition has been giving humans preferential treatment in exchange for military support. But those agreements do not exist, Kelthok said. Exactly. But we created enough false evidence to make them look real. Now 3 coalition members are accusing their own leadership of corruption and favoritism. The parliament has been gridlocked for 2 weeks. Kelthok studied the humans around the table. They discussed deception and manipulation the way his people had once talked about weapon maintenance and battle tactics. It came naturally to them, like breathing. Does victory justify everything? He asked Lee Hanna after learning about her latest operation, which had turned an entire coalition fleet against its own command. Structured through fabricated evidence of planned executions. Lee Hanna looked at him with eyes that had grown harder. Over the months of war, does honor matter if you are extinct? The question hit him like a physical blow. His people had chosen honor over victory, and they were all dead. These humans chose victory over honor. And the coalition was dying. Reports came in daily now of coalition forces surrendering rather than fighting. Some commanders claimed they could no longer tell who their real enemies were. Others said they refused to serve leaders who might be traitors. Few simply stated that the war had become too confusing to continue. For the first time since his people died, Kelthok allowed himself to believe in victory. But as he watched the humans celebrate another successful operation, he wondered what kind of galaxy they were creating. The old rules of warfare were gone, replaced by something more efficient, but infinitely more ruthless. The coalition was learning that humanity did not fight wars. They waged them. There was a difference that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The war ended not with explosions or grand battles, but with a tired old alien sitting at a small table, signing papers with shaking hands. Ambassador Kriltok of the coalition looked like he had not slept in months. His green skin was pale, and his 4 eyes kept moving around the room as if he expected enemies to jump out from behind the walls. Kelthok stood beside Lee Hanna in the conference room of Neutral Station Omega, watching the surrender ceremony. It felt strange to be here, in this quiet place, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs. He had imagined this moment would happen on a battlefield, with burning ships and the sounds of weapons firing. Instead, it was happening in a room that looked like a place where people came to drink tea and discuss business. The Coalition Accord hereby dissolves all military obligations and territorial claims. Ambassador Kriltok read from the surrender document. His voice shook with each word. All member species are free to pursue individual peace agreements with human forces and their allies. The ceremony took less than an hour. 30 years of Kelthok's lonely war, followed by 8 months of human warfare, ending with the scratch of a pen on paper. It should have felt more important somehow. As the coalition representatives left the station, many of them would not look at the humans. They whispered to each other in their own languages, but Kelthok's translator picked up words like monsters. And without honor and what have we created? Lee Hanna approached him as the room emptied. You look sad for someone who just won a war. I am not sad, Kelthok said. I am confused. This victory does not feel like what I thought it would. Victories never do, Captain Park said, joining their conversation. But it is still a victory. The coalition is finished. Your people have been avenged. Kelthox nodded, but something felt hollow inside his chest. He had dreamed of this moment. For 3 decades, in his dreams, he had imagined coalition leaders begging for mercy, admitting their crimes, asking forgiveness for what they had done to his people. Instead, they had just looked tired and defeated, like workers who had lost their jobs. Your people would have done this differently, Lehanna said. Reading his expression the way she had learned to do over the months they had worked together, my people would have lost, Kelthox admitted. You were too proud to fight the way you fight. Too concerned with honor to do what was necessary to win. The humans had taught the galaxy a new way to wage war. They had shown that victory belonged to those willing to use any method, attack any target, tell any lie that brought them closer to their goal. The old rules of combat, protecting civilians, respecting prisoners, fighting with honor had been thrown away like broken tools. Colonel Kim Minho came over with a data pad full of reports. Intelligence says 23 former coalition species want to hire human military advisors. They want to learn our methods before their neighbors do. And how many species are trying to form new alliances against us? Lehanna asked. At last count, they're calling it the Honor Pact. Their goal is to bring back the old ways of warfare and contain human influence. Kelthox was not surprised. The galaxy had always feared change, and humanity represented the biggest change in galactic warfare since the invention of space travel. Species that had fought according to ancient traditions for thousands of years were now being forced to choose, adapt to human methods, or risk being conquered by those who did. What happens now? He asked.
Now we build something new, Lehanna said. Dad!
The coalition is gone, but the galaxy still needs structure. Still needs someone to keep the peace. Humans will provide that peace. Humans will provide security to those who want it and can pay for it. Protection to those who ally with us. Consequences to those who threaten us or our interests. Lieutenant Commander Choi Ji-won approached their group with news from the communications center. The hegemony of worlds is requesting a meeting about establishing formal relations. Crystalline Empire wants to discuss trade agreements. And the Zephyrian Republic is asking if we would be interested in helping them resolve a border dispute with their neighbors. The galaxy was already adapting to its new reality. The species that survived would be those smart enough to work with humanity rather than against them. The ones that clung to old ways of thinking would find themselves isolated and vulnerable. As they walked through the station toward their ships, Kelthox realized that his role in the galaxy had changed completely. For 30 years, he had been the last warrior of a dead species, fighting a hopeless battle for revenge. Now, he was something different. A symbol, perhaps. A reminder of what happened to those who opposed the New Order? The Apex had been the galaxy's greatest warriors, feared and respected for their strength and honor. They had ruled through superior genetics and military skill, expecting others to accept their dominance because it was the natural order. Humanity had become something more dangerous. They had become the galaxy's teachers in the art of total war. They did not rule through strength alone, but through the knowledge that they were willing to do whatever was necessary to win. Other species would learn to fight like humans, or they would learn to lose to them. The age of honorable warfare was over. The age of human warfare had begun. And Kelthox, the last of the Apex, would help make sure the galaxy never forgot the difference.